So I discovered this tweet on Twitter from a Korean user, Isol Jupiter. I don't speak Korean. I've been machine translating this, and no, I'm a crying person. Op mouth. See, I don't understand any of this. But I'm kind of getting this interpretation about how the character designs are sort of changed. I realize my brain is all over the point. Let's start with, first they post images from the Chaos Theory arc from the 2009 Transformers IDW comic series. Now, the Chaos Theory story arc was a story arc devoted to really looking into the past of the Cybertronian War, looking at Megatron before the events of Megatron Origin and comparing him with Megatron of today, looking at Optimus Prime and revealing more about his past. And to reflect that, we have these covers that were released for those issues. And this person points out that the character designs from the olden days are a bit raw, stained, and broken in the past, but in the present they're both neat. I want to explore that train of thought while I was looking at these covers, because I think there's actually a lot that can be said about these covers for these issues of the Chaos Theory arc and what it says about the Megatron and Optimus Prime character. So first we have Megatron. The first cover is Megatron during his days as a miner. We see him in a very rustic, there's rust, there's broken chips off of his armor, cracks on the face. It's a very worn out character design. Well, the present, which would have been around 2011 in the IDW timeline, is a much more new, cleaner, almost sparkly clean body. Now, one thing I think that's interesting to point out is the eyes don't really change that much. The eyes, the scowl, those don't really change that much. So it's sort of symbolizing that this is the same character, this is the same individual, this is the same Megatron. At the core of his being, he is the same. But it also shows that there have been changes. Now, from an in-universe perspective, yes, Megatron had this body for around 1 million years, and he had this body for maybe 2 at the most. So I can, at least when this art was created. So it's, from an in-universe perspective, it's reasonable to assume that this body would have much more damage than this one, but art isn't supposed to be taken at face value all the time. I think the older Megatron reminds us of Megatron's roots as a miner, of how he was from the underbelly of Cybertron, how he had to pick his way up through the ranks from a miner to eventually the emperor of an empire. He had a very harsh life, very rough, and it sort of sparked the flames of revolution within him. However, with the more modern day picture, we see him with a new body. This body was created out of a mixture of Ore-13 and there's a black hole in the middle of his chest. There's a lot that's really fancy about this body he has at this point in the comics. This comes right after the events of a story arc called Revenge of the Decepticons, and throughout the IDW universe, it's interesting. With the IDW universe, we start out seeing a lot about Megatron. We hear a lot about his origin with Megatron Origin. And then there's the 4 million year time skip, and it gets to the point where Megatron, instead of the character through the lens we are seeing the world of the IDW universe, all of a sudden becomes more of an antagonist that everyone else is looking at, that the reader is looking at instead of looking through. So, the Revenge of the Decepticon arc in particular, but also to some degree All Hail Megatron and other stories, really push the fact that the Megatron of 4 million years ago is not the Megatron of today. Stormbringer does this as well. Megatron is emphasized that he is no longer the revolutionary person, he's become completely corrupted. Megatron at this point is irredeemable. He became corrupted by his power. It's a very traditional story of, someone seeking power against the elites, then getting the power, then becoming the thing they swore to destroy. that was sort of the big arc for Megatron in the IDW universe. He started off as a little guy being oppressed, then he became the oppressor. He became the villain that was irredeemable with everything they revealed about Megatron's character. Megatron was more revealed through people talking about the events Megatron participated in and the crimes Megatron committed, as opposed to seeing Megatron for himself. Now, the Autocracy trilogy also emphasized this. In my opinion, the Autocracy trilogy was kind of anachronistic with how quickly Megatron became irredeemable. But at the same point, it's all part of this overall arc where Megatron becomes becomes a thing he swore to destroy. And Revenge of the Decepticons and getting into chaos theory really pushes that. It really makes the point that this Megatron, there is nothing that remains about that old Megatron from the past. Now, I love this cover. It perfectly describes the character arc Megatron has gone through. And I think it's interesting, considering the people who worked on More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light, because they played a big role in the Chaos Theory two-parter, but yet the whole character, in quotations, development Megatron gets in More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light completely flies into the face of what we've already established Megatron's story arc to be. I know I've been a vocal opponent to Megatron's so-called redemption arc in More Than Meets the Eye. I feel like he was grossly out of character. I think if you had asked me before More Than Meets the Eye, what Megatron out there, what interpretation of Megatron was the most irredeemable Megatron, number one, I'd probably give the Unicron Trilogy cartoon Megatron, but number two, at a very close second, would be the IDW Megatron. And then, of course, they make that the strange, like pretty weird to be honest, decision to make him an Autobot and try to make him seem all remorseful and like try to make you sympathize with him when you can't do that, not with everything Megatron's done. And I think the largest problem with this is that so many readers of More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light were like new readers who only read More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light and didn't really understand the context of the IDW universe and thought, yeah, Megatron can be redeemed, because they think of Megatron as like, you know, the villain of the month dude in the Saturday cartoons. You know, they don't understand how Megatron was completely reinterpreted for the IDW universe and how IDW Megatron does not really work with the later interpretation of IDW Megatron in Lost Light. I think these covers perfectly encapsulate the Megatron story arc. Now, going to Optimus Prime comes into the IDW universe from a different angle than Megatron. With Megatron, we got his past, and we understood his past, and then 4 million year time skip, and then we see his future, but we're no longer looking at it through his lens. We're having to learn about it, piece it together from other other sources of information. With Optimus Prime, when the IDW universe started, Optimus Prime was just kind of the commander of the Autobots in the present day. Optimus Prime barely showed up in Megatron Origin. Especially around this point in time in the IDW continuity, barely anything had been given about Optimus Prime's young life. You had a little story, half an issue in All Hail Megatron that sort of was a flashback to a young Optimus commander. Spotlight Blur had also come out and showed Optimus as a young bot, but we really hadn't seen anything much of Optimus Prime before the war when this book came out. So Chaos Theory reflects this in its covers, because this is like the first story arc where we really dive into Optimus Prime's past. The first cover we have is his modern day interpretation, and then we go to how he looked back during 4 million years ago. So instead of, I think Megatron here represents that we've seen Megatron's past first and then went into the present. Chaos Theory's covers here represent that you think you know Optimus Prime, but it's time to go back and take a look at his past. So Optimus Prime, all shiny, all new. In continuity, he only had this body for around 2 years at this point, 2 years at most, so it makes sense for it to be all shiny and new. Then we go to the body he had for over 1 million years, which of course that would look damaged. But what does it mean? What's the interpretation? Of course, the eyes are the same, you know, the window into the soul is the same. But what can we interpret from the damage on Optimus Prime from the past? And I think we can really see that Optimus Prime might not have been... It's really emphasizing that Optimus Prime isn't who we think he is. Now, later on, future stories would really hammer this in with the Optimus Prime series, but you really start to see the hints being placed with Chaos Theory. Chaos Theory introduces Optimus Prime as Orion Pax, which, first of all, that in of itself is an interesting decision because every pre-war story we've seen of Optimus Prime, he's been called Optimus, and this one just sort of breaks continuity and calls him Orion Pax. So it's like everything you know is a lie. But beyond just the names, Orion Pax is a servant to the Senate, but he is sort of questioning the Senate's ways. He is a police officer, and you really get to see sort of the compromises he has to make with his own morality, living in a Senate-controlled Cybertron. You see him turn his own friend's dead body into a motorcycle to drive into battle with, to fight off his killers. You also see Optimus sort of sympathizing with Megatron. It's like, oh, Optimus was a pro-Megatron person once upon a time? Now, really, a lot of pre-war Orion Pax's story arc is given more in the Optimus Prime series, but Chaos Theory really plants the seeds, and it makes this cover make more sense with that context later on, retroactively, I guess. And that was really the point of the Chaos Theory story arc, to show we know where Megatron was and where he is now. Let's try to understand the difference between the two. They really hammer in that Megatron's a different person now. And then at the same time, we know who Optimus Prime is, we barely know what he was. So let's take a moment to explore who Optimus Prime was. And another note, Chaos Theory the IDW Universe 1 in general tended to do very well with pre-war stuff. In fact, some might say they almost overly explored the pre-war stuff, but it was really well done, especially at the time when Chaos Theory came out, when there wasn't much about the pre-war history. I think, looking at these covers right now, I'm reminded of how good Chaos Theory was, and how good it was at setting up a world before the war, and how it only needed... Chaos Theory, the flashbacks are just half of like the issues, so really, even though it's a 2-issue series, putting the flashbacks together, it was one issue. In one issue, the first IDW universe explored all these parts of everything we needed to know about the early, before the war days. Well, the current IDW Universe 2 is dragging its feet immensely. And I know I'm not up to date on my reviews for the second IDW universe yet. I plan on getting around to that eventually, but I haven't forgotten about that, trust me. But yeah, it's just reminding me how good the first IDW universe was, and especially Chaos Theory. Chaos Theory was very strong. Yeah, that's just me giving an analysis of these comic covers that came out several years ago. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoy like more critical analyses of stuff like this. It's something I have an interest in doing. Subscribe to this channel if you have not yet. Support me on Patreon if you want to see this channel continue. Check out the tiers on Patreon. Follow me on social media. As you can see, I definitely have a Twitter. And yeah, have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. Huge thanks to our patrons, including this month's $10 plus patron Josh Adkins. Check out the description for more patrons and more info about how you can receive a shout out here. So I hope I die soon.